change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Fundraising AI podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell, and I am here with one of my dearest, most favorite people on the entire planet. Mallory Erickson is joining me today. And honestly, I'm so excited for this conversation because pretty much every conversation that we have is amazing. And the things that we're going to talk about today are extra amazing. So Mallory, thank you so much for taking the time in your really busy schedule, spending some quality time together to talk about AI, leadership, and agency and accountability and all the things.
Well, I'm so excited to be here today. And likewise, every conversation with you is my favorite, the ones we record and don't record. And so I'm so grateful to get to chat with you always about these things.
I don't know if you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you and I were just entering into a pre-conversation, and Scott and I suffer from the same thing. I don't know if you do with What the Fundraising. It's like, it should just be an automatic thing that you hit record right when you get on, because all the best stuff just happens so organically and it's just like perfect. Do you deal with that too? Like, do you have that like buyer's remorse where you're like, you should have recorded before?
It's actually, I've stopped doing pre-sessions for What the Fundraising. And I tell people, I'm like, the magic is in the first conversation. So I need you to just trust me. You can edit anything you want afterwards, but anyone who needs a pre-call to decide if they come on, then I'm like, it's not the right show for you, because I'm going to be too frustrated with myself at the end of that pre-show that was the episode.
Well, you are, no doubt smarter than I am. And that's why, you've mastered this whole thing. I keep on making the same mistake over and over and over again, which is the definition of insanity. So I'm really excited for a variety of different reasons to have you. And you and I were just on a conversation on What the Fundraising. And, we wanted to do this because you came up with an idea a couple of years ago that you took to market, and people know because they hear me talk about Practivated all the time that it's just like, I think, one of the most innovative answers of a responsible, beneficial, and responsible use of AI to actually empower and enable people. And you've just had like tremendous success in building this company and just giving it so much sweat equity. But you didn't build that company to make a ton of money. You didn't build it to prove that you're better than anyone. You built it because you saw technology and how that technology could solve a kind of a fundamental issue of something that you had really spent your heart and soul, leaning into for years. And that was like empowering people to have better conversations and to empower them with tools to learn. And then it didn't stop there. So I'm bringing everyone up to speed on this. And I know I'm making you like just cringe. We do this to each other often. Is that when you called, I don't know, a couple months ago, you're like, I have an idea. And, because it was never about the money, it was about the impact. Is like, you're finding people, and you can fill in the gaps here, but you're finding people having a hard time communicating about AI, what it can do, what it can't do, how to talk about it with board members or donors or employees. And you're like, what if we use this tool and we infuse it with all of the intelligence that fundraising AI has gathered over a period of time, and then release it to the world for free? And so we're here today to talk about the manifestation of that crazy idea. You poured a lot more heart and soul into that. And now we have this tool, which we're releasing to the world. And I think it's just amazing. I mean, so first of all, thank you for doing good work for the right reasons and not just saying, oh, I have an idea, but actually carrying it out and doing this. So we'll unpack it a little bit. And then I think we'll dive into his leadership and what it's going to take. Even though the tool's there, it's going to sit there idle unless people actually understand the agency and responsibility that they have to actually do something with it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for all of your kind words about it. And I think, maybe part of, for me, was like, not even like I want to build a tool or I have an idea for a tool. It's like, I want to solve this problem, and I am going to claw my way across whatever line is necessary to try to solve these problems of declines in participation to the sector, fundraiser burnout. And I just feel like have been for 5 years trying to solve this problem, and then found a tool that might help me at scale do that now is helping me. But at first I wasn't even sure. And I think that's the other thing that has helped me stay really committed to the work is that, and maybe move into more action and agency, is how much of it is rooted in the challenge and the problem that I want to solve, as opposed to like, oh, I have this idea on this like cool thing, which I don't think, at least for my neurodivergent brain, would keep my attention for long enough, right? It really is this hyperfixation on solving this problem that allows me to move through all the discomfort of building and iterating and doing, a million new things every day.
That's absolutely amazing that you did that. And, as someone that also is this neurodivergent brain, it is something that like I recognize that I learn in different ways. In fact, I had this kind of pre-read for a board meeting today, and it's this like super long document. And I'm like, that is like really painful for me and really hard to do. The very first thing I did is I put it in a Notebook LM. I actually created a video of it. And then I was like, holy crap, these videos they're so good. Practivated is that, and you don't have to be neurodivergent to appreciate it, because you can't get live real-time feedback with everyone all the time. And I recall, and I think I've shared this story with you, a meeting I sat in when I was at City of Hope, and we were prepping for an ask. And there's comfort, misery loves company, I guess, but there's comfort in like bringing people together in a room, and everyone's nerves are a little high. And it's like, you prepped for this for a long time, but now it's finally coming. And we role played for quite a while on like what the ask was going to be. What are they going to ask? What are they not? Like, what do we want to get out of it? And at some point during this meeting, I just kind of paused and I looked around and I called the meeting. And I think we had like 7 or 8 people in there. And these are like highly paid, expensive people that all had, their kind of unique slices of the pie in terms of like their own experience over the years, but none of them were like the definitive, like answer to all these things. And I remembered in my head, I was calculating how much that meeting cost. And that meeting literally, and if I remember right, it was something like $1,500 to just have it for like a half an hour. And I'm like, this is not, well, it's not a good use of money. It's not scalable. And while people can learn through those things, it's not fully informed. So the work that you've done with Practivated is really, it's amazing. And to see the people that have given you the testimonials of like how much kind of that personalized learning journey can be, and to get real-time feedback, it's amazing. So first of all, I know you weren't going to plug this because that wasn't the purpose of the podcast, but if you have not tried Practivated, you have to try it. It is like an absolute game changer in terms of like building your confidence as a fundraiser, which is really the thing that I think can help reverse the generosity crisis and scale this work, which their motivation. So there's an area that you and I think we've been on this journey a long time. First of all, actually, no, one step back. I'm just curious because this is Fundraising AI podcast and we get nerdy. When you built Practivated 2 years ago was like the first iteration about?
Not even, maybe a year and 6 months ago.
What was it built on? Like GPT-4 or 3.5 or?
Yeah.
Originally.
Yeah, I think 4.
I'm just, new models dropped last week, GPT 5.5, and then of course like Claude Fable 5 and these, and I'm like, I think people have no idea like what these models can do now. Like even in this short period of time that you've done this, like, do you see how those models improve the performance of like the interactions that people get and like the feedback and the things that you're able to do as an entrepreneur? I'm just curious, like that entrepreneur hat, have you seen kind of this dramatic rise in model accuracy and efficacy and speed, like shift into that work?
So this is going to be really interesting. We've never talked about this before, so you don't know how I make these decisions, which is super interesting. But we actually have not adjusted our base model.
Okay.
And for conversations. And there's actually 2 primary reasons for that. Actually, even when Practivated first came out, we were not using the highest. I actually think GPT-5 was out and we were using 4.0. And we've tested every single model that you can imagine. And it's been really important to me from a sustainability perspective. Number one, that we're always seeing how we can get the best possible results from the least amount of energy consumption. So I've always played with lower models for our like environmental footprint. But so that's one piece of it. The other thing, and I haven't tested this again recently because we're very satisfied with the results, but I also found earlier for voice models, anyone who's playing with that I actually think the faster the model, or the sort of quote unquote better the model, that often doesn't translate into the realism of the conversation. That sometimes it's actually way too fast and can be really disorienting if you're running voice simulations at a higher processing power. The other thing I'll say is that this is something that I've been grappling with a lot recently. So sometimes once in a while, people will say, oh, well, it doesn't sound totally like a real person.
Right.
Like it's like 97% there. And I'm like, yeah, I think it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I actually very consciously, we have played around with the pauses, we have played around with everything. It is so important to me. And even with the way that we do it, we will still hear stories of, I forgot I was talking to an avatar and I was talking about my summer plans for 10 minutes and I got totally lost in the conversation and blah, blah, blah. But for me, it's actually really important that there is like cognitive awareness and dissonance between when we are talking to AI and when we are talking to humans. And so I really intentionally use voices and visual representations in the product, and the way in which, like the speed at which the results are
Right.
provided to create that level of awareness. Just like if you were playing a sports, like you were practicing basketball, you would never not know you're practicing basketball. There would never be
Right.
a simulated game where you lose sense of reality and are you in a real game or are you in a practice? You know you're in practice. You have to
Mhm.
practice the right way and with the right coach to get the value in practice that shows up during the game. Yes, that requires a very specific way of delivering practice, which we do, but I think that awareness is important.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I mean, all those are really good points. And, the environmental impact, well taken. I was on the phone with 11 Labs not long ago, and they were saying, I think I shared this with you at one point, but they were like, in 6 months, models will sound exactly like humans. And sure enough, it was 3 months later or maybe 2 months later, that GPT, the new voice mode, rolled out 2 weeks ago. And I didn't even know the model had released. And then I used voice mode, which is that's all I do, on a Monday. And like, I never got an alert that it came out, but I knew instantly, because it was like, hey, and then it was like, let me check on that. And there is this, Scott and I talked about this on our last podcast episode, is there's a very concerning kind of brain function that was happening, because like, I know you're a bot, you sound really like human, and I kind of like that, but it's patronizing. And so like I'm reconciling, but then it's like, Scott and I were testing it and we're like, if you could eat a fruit, what would you want? And the first time it answered was like, oh, you know what? If I were real, I would just love to eat an apple, like the crisp sense of like biting through that skin and the flavor to burst through. And he and I both started feeling empathy for the bot as we're listening to this. And it's funny because the second time we asked that question during the podcast, it answered totally different. It was like a much more measured thing, because we were like, hey, you're a guest on our podcast. And it was like such an interesting mind kind of experiment that we were like both struggling with. So totally point taken. I also think it's inevitable that all bots end up sounding exactly like humans, because your bot that doesn't will probably be divested at some point and it will be replaced with bots that do. In which case, you have visuals and you have disclosures and all the other things that use as cues to like make sure that that you're still practicing. But anyway, sorry. Thank you for like letting me take you down that rabbit hole. I think it's just so interesting as like kind of the exponential curve of these models continues to go up to the right. In fact, well, there's some new studies that came out this week that just showed that by May of 2027, an agentic model can work for 8 hours and 30 minutes on its own. So we're talking like a full work week on its own. So these models are improving so much faster than we thought. And the good thing is that your work's based on human psychology and human behavior and, learning patterns, that those things don't change all that much. Like, fortunately, those like small language models and regular sized models actually know that stuff really well. Okay. So the thing that you and I were talking about, we wish we hit record on, was the thing about agency and accountability and leadership. And so let's talk a little bit about this. So you've now been at this for almost 2 years, and you've had, your fair share of conversations inside boardrooms, inside, executive team meetings. You've seen probably both leaders that like, oh yeah, the future is very clear. And unless we get on this AI thing, we're going to be irrelevant. But I think you have probably just as many or maybe more, just fill in the blanks, people that are like, yeah, we know this is part of the future, but maybe not yet, maybe not maybe not now or in this way. Where are you thinking the sector is right now in terms of like AI adoption from a leadership perspective? And the reason why I think it's important to dive in there is, of course, leaders play that biggest, most outsized role in culture, in how an organization moves forward. So from that top down piece. So what's your sense of that kind of mid 2026?
Yeah. I mean, I think sadly, and we sort of I'll say like we sort of sit at this interesting intersection because while on the one hand, we are AI adoption because it is AI inside our platform, it is a software. We sit also sort of on the services side, right? So a lot of the conversations that we're having are really around like professional development and supporting fundraisers and the experience of their fundraisers and the challenges they're seeing in helping onboard their fundraisers or upskilling them, growing their own fundraising pipeline. So I would say like we see sort of like two sets of leadership challenges, right? One is innovation around just solving those problems. And I don't even feel like it's always the AI barrier. It's really the innovation barrier that I sort of see often before the AI adoption challenges, right? Which is, oh, well, we've worked with so-and-so for 20 years. And so we're going to keep letting them train our fundraisers, even though they're essentially managing decline and their fundraisers are turning over every year. And so I've been, as you know, like sort of frustrated with the complacency that I feel like I've seen. And to me, it's not about Practivated. I think what I was saying, before we clicked record is somebody was asking me, I was having a really rough day like a week ago. My best friend was like, are you like, what's going on? And I was like, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, I thought like if I could solve this problem, that like I could solve this problem. I was like, if I can figure out how to solve this problem of declines in participation and fundraiser burnout and fundraiser support and enablement, then I could like solve this problem for the world. Like that, which is all I want, like to improve the lives of fundraisers. And I was like, and now I've realized like there's so much stagnation and there's so much friction in leadership and in change and with overwhelm that like I can solve the problem technologically in terms of a service, in terms of a product, but getting people to be willing to try something new to solve a pain point that I feel like is pretty big for them. And the fact that there's still often such a challenge there, I think has been really hard to see. And I think, so many people will say, well, you're working in higher ed or healthcare or large federated organizations. Like, of course, there's a lot of bureaucracy. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, of course. But I'm sorry, like higher ed and healthcare, like have seen the biggest swinged impacts to their verticals in the last 18 months than ever before. If now is not a time to frickin' move, I don't know what is. Like, and so I think it's just a little bit mind-boggling to me that I'm like, if we are going to let the rate of change and attack and funding loss outpace our agility to make decisions and take risks and put ourselves out there and try new things, like then we are not headed to a great place. The Sagittarius in me can never say the word doomed because we're like eternal optimists. But I'm like, gosh, like, y'all, if the time is not now, then when will the time be that we take it seriously enough to do things differently? And I think the fact that what has happened to our sector over the past 18 months has not been enough to drive more comprehensive action. And again, this is not just about Practivated. This is about adoption of any tool that's going to solve your organization's specific problem. I think, but I've seen it with Practivated. Like, I think that's been my vantage point of like seeing an organization with a very particular challenge that we are positioned solving in a very short amount of time. And the fact that there's still resistance makes me like, wow, like, are we really willing to do what it takes to reverse these things?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I could see that your emotion and your blood pressure is going up because you care so deeply. I mean, it comes from a place of care. Also surprised that we're friends because I'm probably the more consistent doomer of the group. But I mean, that's what keeps it interesting, right? You've
Yin
got
and
to have the
yang.
yin and the yang. I don't know what Capricorn is, but probably not the eternal optimist, if I had to gather. So there's so much to unpack there. And I actually wrote down a couple notes because I'm just like, there's so many things that were going through my head that I just wanted to be sure to capture. But number one, I guess the idea that ideas are easy, but scale is hard. Like Virtuous as a software company is like ideas are easy and easier than ever. Scale is hard. A lot of times scale can be mitigated or overcome with money and marketing. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like, if you had unlimited marketing, I think I know that what the answer that you'll say, but if you had like millions of dollars in marketing and you're just like, it's just the issue that people don't know about this. They just don't know about it. I'm going to put it in front of everyone and with a cool demo and video or something. Do you think that changes this? Is that the core issue? Is it lack of awareness or is it something deeper? And if it is something deeper, what do you think is that at the core of I forget the word that you used, but the slowness, or use a more provocative word than that, but the lack of appetite for this? What would that do if you had all the marketing money you needed?
Yeah. Well, I definitely don't think it's awareness of a product. I think it's education about the problem. And I think it's probably education that the problem can be solvable. And maybe even like coaching and education that we can do it, that we can solve it. I think in my most like empathetic self, what I really see, and I know I was getting fired up because I do just want everybody to get out of their own way, but I see the exhaustion. I see the exhaustion across the sector, and I see these really smart, capable leaders that probably, honestly, if they look in the mirror, aren't their favorite versions of themselves because they're tired. And they've been, especially for the last 5 years, dealing with challenge after challenge after challenge in the midst of fundraiser turnover. I think the desperation that they feel is at like an all-time high. And I get that. And I have been there and like in that burnout myself. And so I think that the biggest challenge that they face is, one, just the level of like complete overwhelm that they feel, and how does anything new, even if it can solve all these problems, fit into a place of feeling so overwhelmed. And then also, honestly, gosh, I'm just going to be so candid. I think the other thing when it comes to technology in general is that we've, especially sitting on the practitioner side, which from sitting there for 20 years, we've been burned by tech, like so much. I mean, how many things have come in promising the world, promising to solve all this problem, to make our life easier, that even the tech could do X, Y, and Z, and then we bought it and it couldn't do that. Or it took 2 years, or did it badly, or I had to hire a consultant to get it to do that. And I think we've just been like lied to and manipulated and bullied by tech in this sector for so long that people are wary and skeptical and have tech trauma. And so I think that's creating this other thing, like as AI comes in and makes all these promises, is like, it's like a little bit of like the boy who cried wolf, right? It's like, well, like, I'm not going to believe you this time. And it's like, okay, but it really is a wolf this time. But what can we do? And so, yeah, I think it's that. And that I think for leaders, it's isolating being a leader. And I remember like as an executive director, the thing that was always the hardest for me was like being that linchpin between the board and then all my staff, and feeling like somebody was always mad at me. There was never a day where everybody was satisfied with the decisions I was making. And I think that can create a lot of paralysis and a lot of stagnation just because that role is hard and it's getting harder.
Yeah. There's a few things that you said that I think about a lot, which is this idea that change mostly happens when the pain gets great enough. And I wrote an article recently about kind of just this leadership dynamic in the private sector right now. You're seeing actually like very qualified CEOs of very prominent companies, I mean, including Apple and Coca-Cola, step aside because in a very proud way to say, look, I was the right type of leader that got us to where we're at. And we're really proud of all the things we've achieved. But the world has changed fundamentally. And the future belongs to a leader that can really lean into that change and guide the new organization into this kind of new competitive environment. I was with someone at Giving Institute last week who's a recruiter, professional recruiter, and I said, how often he'd actually just done a whole session on recruiting and, for the whole audience there. And after, he didn't mention AI at all. So after we're at dinner and I said, like, how often are you being asked, like you're recruiting leaders to nonprofit organizations, being asked to give us the unicorn, the person that understands AI and the sector and all the things. And he literally was completely taken aback. He's like, never. And then he started reflecting on it. He's like, I'm really worried about that. He became worried about this idea. Like, so I think I have to conclude that the pain is not great enough. Now, most boards know in their own world, like what it takes to run a private sector company, but they come to the nonprofit with a completely different set of rules and expectations. So I think one is it's who's in the seat. And then some of those people that haven't taken account for like, what does it look like to lead in the color purple? Because I've led in the color black and white my entire life, and it's very uncomfortable, right? So I think there's some of that. And then two, it's like they're not understanding. In fact, they're not understanding how much has changed. I think most people have a very outdated definition already of what AI is and what it's becoming. And they're thinking that it will get easier in some ways, but there's no doubt that AI is getting harder in the sense that you still use a prompt to extract a thing. But what AI can do is almost to a point, unless you've already been in it for a year, very hard to catch up into. So then that feeling of isolation that you're talking about becomes more and more pronounced and profound. And leaders that aren't embracing the color purple are kind of shirking back into like, okay, I'm just going to do things the way I've always done them. And so I just think it's an interesting paradigm that you're facing with, because you have a tool that's very easy and accessible in a world where there's this like exponential change. And so let's talk a little bit about the tool that you've then kind of reimagined for AI, because, of course, your Practivated tool is built to like empower fundraisers to have better conversations with higher degree of efficacy. When you decided to kind of make a spin-off of that around AI, do you think this, what I guess we could talk about the hope first and the intention around it. Why is it something that you think that the sector can benefit from by retooling Practivated to help people have better conversations around AI?
So, one of the things, just for folks who might not be familiar with the tool, that I'll say is, so Practivated is, we call it the first ever fundraiser readiness platform. And we build readiness by building skills, confidence, and muscle memory at the same time. And we do that through this really intentional sequencing and combining of three core elements: role play, like practicing in with an AI avatar, coaching with a coach Tivi inside the platform, and then insight. So feedback on the role play and your own tendencies around communication and gaps, et cetera. And the thing that we've learned, over our first year is you can get all of those features sort of ad hoc inside the platform as you need them. But we also, about 8 months ago, created programs inside the platform. And so programs are sequences of practice conversations, coaching conversations, and insight that drive towards particular fluency or skill building. And what we've found is that type of varied and diverse role play in that environment, matched with expert coaching that can be tailored to a coach's and consultant's method as well, all of that is what actually gets us ready, right? Like that, the difference between learning about something in our prefrontal cortex and actually being able to take action on it is its ability to get into our body, and for us to have that muscle memory and a regulated nervous system when we're going to take action, right? And for years, I've been talking about in my keynotes, when we learn about something, it's all up in our prefrontal cortex. When we go to do the thing, it goes into our back brain, our amygdala, and then our nervous system comes online. That stress response actually gets in the way of us taking that action. So we have to down-regulate our nervous system in order to get over the action line. But I've been mostly teaching that over the last 5 years, using different cognitive or somatic tooling to help down-regulate our nervous system. What I learned really fast with Practivated was that Practivated does that. that the muscle memory and the insight, the clarity, the decreasing of uncertainty, all of that support actually makes you more regulated and capable to not only enter a conversation, but handle whatever comes up in this conversation. And you and I have talked about this a lot, where I think, we really misunderstand confidence in our sector. And we think confidence is about certainty. Do you feel like certain that you understand how AI works? That's not confidence. That's protection. That's believing that you can't talk about AI unless you understand every single component, which nobody does, certainly not me, okay? And so, but that certainty that we look for, that we pretend to have, or maybe in some circumstances we actually have, that is not a sign of confidence. What is a sign of confidence is curiosity, because what curiosity signals is your openness to handling whatever comes up. Like, curiosity is saying, I can ask a question without knowing what the answer is going to be, and whatever it is, I can handle it. I can tell them, you know what, let me do some research on that and I'm going to loop back, or that's such a great question that nobody's asked before. That is true confidence, to be able to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty and not need to escape it. When I started to look at where I felt like we were getting caught in AI conversations, or where I felt like the sector was getting caught even taking a step forward with AI towards anything, towards governance, towards usage expectation, towards using a tool, choosing a tool, any of those things, I felt like as a sector, we were stuck in this like pre-conversation conversation. Like, oh, our donors will feel blah, blah, blah. I'm like, ask your donors, talk to your donors. Like, our staff is going to talk to your staff, right? Like, our board is going to talk to your board. Like, we must, if nothing else, get out of the pre-conversation conversation and start to have conversations about AI. Now, I know it is scary. One, because nobody understands how it works. The other, because people feel really far behind and overwhelmed. And because for a lot of folks, myself included, I am not a technologist. Tech has scared me. I have for a very long time felt like a 95-year-old in a 40-year-old's body trying to create reels. Okay, Dana Snyder says it's like the funniest thing in the world to watch me try to use social media, because I do look like a 95-year-old using my phone. Okay, so then for somebody like me to feel like I can have a fluent conversation about technology with a board member where there's already a power dynamic involved, or with a donor where there's already a power dynamic involved, is terrifying. The only way for me to feel more capable of doing that is to do it. And if I'm not going to do it with my boss or my board first, then I need to do it in a practice environment where I'm getting feedback and getting clarity and getting coaching. And so we created this AI readiness program inside Practivated, which is our first ever program that isn't rooted in fundraising results, is really rooted in fluency in another topic area, AI fluency, obviously, in this case. And for me, it was really important because I just, you know me, and paralysis is like the thing I always want to help people get out of. And from our experience with fundraising AI and just what we've seen, how we've seen the landscape change over the last few years, I feel like the paralysis has increased. And the more we avoid things, the more fear increases around them, the less likely we are to ever do them. So for folks who have been in this place of paralysis and fear for a while, like, they need a tiny step forward to start.
Yeah. It's interesting as you're talking about, all of that, and that dynamic is that it's a little bit of a paradox. Like, you're waiting for the pain to get great enough for people to be motivated to do the thing. But there's a point where the pain will become too great that you won't be able to catch up. And so there's still this moment now where, like, the pre-conversation that you're talking about, is still viable and you're not too late yet. But there will be a time where if you put your head in the sand and just wait around and figure it out a year from now, that it's going to seem like people are speaking a different language entirely. And so I do think that idea of AI fluency is so important as we look at even what jobs are requiring now in terms of, like, not understanding how a transformer model is built and reinforced, but understanding, like, some of the terms, like, or the difference between generative and predictive and agentic AI, and, which tool is good for which thing. Those are the things that I think this tool can do. And again, it's based on, like, the tremendous body of work that Fundraising AI has, and my book, Nonprofit AI, which is a resource in the module, to draw upon like all these questions, like just getting over that scary first hump of like, how do I talk to staff about this? How do I think about it related to the values of our organization? How do I have a conversation with our board to make the case to use AI? And there's all these like sample kind of prompts, if you will, that are cues that a person can jump into. And you and I and Jen Lau have like put it to the test to really have. I ended up with like a fairly long conversation that went into like all kinds of nuances about AI adoption within an organization. And so I just want to thank you for walking the talk and saying, look, I built this thing to help the world and to actually take that extra step to say, like, let's do this thing, let's put it into the world for free. And honestly, I hope people really just jump in. The barrier's minimal because it's free. It's literally like, when people say they don't have time to learn AI, like I just scoff because the average person scrolls 300 feet on their phone a day. So maybe stop scrolling for a day, take a sabbatical from scrolling for one day and start having conversations about how you should think about and process AI as a leader. So not even just for leaders, for anyone that really wants to have conversations. I mean, just equally as important as a staff member saying, how do I convince my leader that AI is important? And so that's essentially what you built. And I think it's a tremendous resource for the community.
Well, thank you. And so much of it is because of everything, all of the free resources that you brought to this community for so many years related to this. And I just know for someone like me, and we both mentioned our neurodiversity on this call, like, especially with AI, I think it can feel really overwhelming to learn a ton of knowledge. You're mentioning the book at the beginning or absorbing all the information, the board meeting notes that you put into Notebook. And I think like for me, I learned through conversation, through asking questions, through wondering. It allows my brain to really like understand things differently. And even in practice conversations to realize my gaps. Right? Like I hope for folks who do it, it's not about getting in. There's no A+ score. Okay, y'all, there's no A+ score. Like you're going to get tailored feedback to you specifically, but it's not about that. Like it's about even in maybe an answer you don't have, recognizing, oh, that's something I want to learn, or that's another thing I want to talk to my colleague about, because when I am asked that by a board member, like that'd be a cool thing to get to mention. And so the idea even in the simulations is that we just get to learn so much about the other questions or maybe material needs that we have. And we get to interact with the fundraising AI framework, which you deserve all the credit in the world for building, along with 90 plus sector leaders through 2,000 touch points and conversations. But that framework and the 10 components of that to be able to process and understand and grapple with that in a conversation format, I feel like my hope is that it really helps move people forward.
Yeah, well, I think so much depends on that. So, as we wrap up, again, heartfelt thanks. One of the things that I just reflecting on when we started our conversation is that when you and I first had the first conversation about the kind of like the idea of fundraising AI, it wasn't about you and it wasn't even about the sector. It was about you as a mom raising two young girls and envisioning a future that may look bright or less bright for them. And reflecting on this week where you had Emmy's birthday and seeing Isla, grow up, kind of just watching you have something to be extremely proud of. There is like every confidence that those young women are looking up and seeing their mom who didn't just have an idea, but actually is given every single thing that she has, every ounce of energy has and the energy that she doesn't have to this thing to build a future for them. And I think there's probably nothing more commendable in life. So I want to say thank you for doing that. I know it has not been easy and I know it's not going to be easy, but you're doing, incredible work and on behalf of the sector, yes, but for, young women like Emmy and Isla that will be able to envision a more generous future because of you. That's something to be really proud of.
Well, now I'm convinced that you just were like, we can't get off this podcast without you crying. So I have to say something to make you cry.
It's always a goal. It was not my goal.
No, thank you. And I think, I had this moment like I didn't want to build Practivated. Not like I didn't want the tool to exist, but I wanted other people to build it.
Right.
I didn't want to found a tech company, and I tried to convince other people to do it. And then I remember like sitting on the couch one night thinking about it, like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to do this? And I thought to myself, of this conversation I'd had earlier that day with Emmy, who turned 7 this past weekend. And I remember saying to her, like, I'd do anything for you. And I just like sat on the couch and I was like, I told her I'd do anything for her. Like, isn't this doing anything for her to do everything I can to try to build the world I want her to live in? And so it is like my motherhood is so deeply entwined with all the decisions that I make, and it keeps me committed to the North Star every day.
It's beautiful, and it's paid off already. I mean, it's already paid off and it will continue to. So thank you, Mallory. This is so great. We can't wait to release this to everyone. We're going to be annoying and telling everyone about it continuously. Remember that you all have agency and that these tools are, well, free in this case, but completely democratized for you to have better conversations about the thing that has opportunity to drive the most impact that has ever been built before. So thank you. And we will touch base with you again soon, and look for all the announcements, and don't just swipe left on all the things about the Fundraising AI Practivated tool. Spend the time, scroll less, look up, and really enjoy, and let us know what you think.